have been in meetings where it's me, a male person from our team, and say a bureaucrat, and I'm speaking, and the response is being like, they're not even looking at me and responding, and they're looking at my male colleague and speaking. One of the things we started during lockdown, because we realized a lot of people were moving to Alibag, for example, and making their base there. So then we started doing deliveries there, because you know, we had a base over there ourselves. So we said, okay, like there's no restaurants open there, there's no delivery, anything. Now you have that in Alibag as well.
That's a smart move.
Yeah, but that's the thing, like, you know, you have to, like, we were never doing deliveries to Alibag before that.
Hi everyone, my guest for today is Gauri Devidayal. She is a renowned entrepreneur and the co-founder and CEO of Food Matters Group, a leading food and hospitality company based in India. She's also the co-founder of Max Street Kitchen and The Table, which are two of the most renowned restaurants in the city of Bombay. She's also the host of 3 podcasts, which are the Colaba Cartel, This Round is on Me, and Women on Top in India. She recently wrote a book named Diamonds for Breakfast. Gauri was listed in Forbes India's 120 Leaders of Change, GQ's list of the 50 most influential young Indians, Black Book's top 50 women in Indian luxury, and not just this, Gauri is also the Joint Secretary of the National Restaurant Association of India. I had a very interesting conversation with Gauri as to how she started her restaurants and what was she doing in the lockdown. I hope you like watching our conversation. Thanks, Gauri, for joining us today in the house. Very excited to be chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
You're one of the few women, I mean, I should have said that you're amongst many, but unfortunately that's not the case right now, in the hospitality sector, who've made a mark. And you know, while I was reading your story, I got to know that you never planned on doing something like this. In fact, you did your law, and after that you were working with PwC as a tax consultant. And you just switched your journey, you know, into something very creative. So I want to really know that what kind of skill sets did you bring to the table when you decided to launch something of your own?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. So I think we hadn't formally decided to do this for the longest time, and it was kind of just happening organically. I mean, but you know, you're absolutely right. It's very important that the two people complement each other with their skill sets and, you know, aren't treading over each other's toes. So I would say I'm left brain and he's right brain, in the sense that I'm sort of much more the risk averse, the auditor, you know, all of that, the lawyer who's everything sort of has to make sense, be, you know, very practical, and he's the complete sort of risk taker, entrepreneur. But I think we both needed each other, and it just works great. But one of the biggest learnings we had very early on, you know, while we were working together, was to recognize and identify each other, the different sort of departments in a way that we would be in charge of. And while we're always open to each other's feedback and ideas, the decision would lie with one or the other for that specific department, right? So I think like setting that foundation is really important for this to work successfully.
But do you think your degree in you know, CA and your experience in tax helped you get that confidence that, okay, I can run this business independently no matter what? And do you think that women who don't come with that kind of background, or at least if they don't have that knowledge, do you think that that is a tiebreaker for them in terms of having confidence to run a business when investors question them on numbers?
So I didn't do my degree with the idea of obviously running my own business, but I'm so grateful that I did both my law degree as well as my accounting qualification, because I think it just set me up to basically do, it's like this such a strong foundation that sets you up for anything, you know, whether you're running your own business, whether you're running your own finances at home, anything. And you're absolutely right about the confidence that it gives you, you know, whether you use it or not, you're not so blindly dependent on somebody else to tell you what's going on in your business. You can question people, you can ask the right questions, you can think for yourself, because you have that, you know, basic knowledge at least. So I'm not saying that everyone should do a chartered accountancy, you know, before starting their own business. But I've always said this to, you know, any founder, entrepreneur who is venturing into something for the first time, that do a basic course in accounts just so you know what is going on and you're not 100% dependent on somebody else to tell you that when it comes to your own business.
Yeah, but you must also have observed this, that females tend to lean more towards creative industries and choose that path. But we see that changing gradually now, where more women are entering into tech related businesses. But why do you think is that mindset even there? Is it like a feministic trait that we have, that okay, we have to stay away from numbers, and from school days only we are taught that okay, maths is very tough and not your cup of tea, so don't even go and touch it. What kind of mindset do you think do we need to bring about to remove this fear that I just am not made for this industry where tech and numbers are in?
I don't know. I mean, I hate to generalize or stereotype, that something is more women or more men. But yes, there is a lot of phobia around maths. I think I'm one of the few people in our company who doesn't see stars when an Excel sheet opens. But it's true, like, even something as basic as Excel, right? A lot of people have no clue about how to use it. And it just goes to show that it's not given its due importance. Numbers are just not given their due importance. And why only business? Like, even at home, you should know how to access net banking or know where your money is, or even if it's a little bit every month, be investing it and putting it away somewhere, and just from a sense of financial independence and ownership of your finances. I think that is so critical, and not because you're looking to make millions off what you invest, but just because of the confidence it gives you that you know what's happening. And I think that's what it comes down to, whether it's at home or in the office. Just that ability to know what's happening. So I don't want to generalize that women are not inclined towards numbers. I mean, you see enough people being in roles where they do need to know that. But I think that being able to expand that beyond just what your technical role is, and even if it's not, like, even if you are in the creative field, like if you're a chef or you're whatever, where you're an artist, you should know your numbers.
I mean, for any business you need to know the numbers.
I mean, being a creative person is not an excuse to not know it.
That's right. But have you ever observed different kinds of traits in you and your partner Jay when it comes to dealing the business side of things? Because many people talk about masculine traits and feminine traits in their businesses, and there are articles by Harvard Business Review which says that only if you are masculine can you succeed, and until women get those traits they will be overlooked. So I want to know from you, like, what kind of differences do you think in your kind of leadership styles at work?
So again, I don't want to generalize or stereotype the male and female role, but I think you need both. And I definitely see that Jay can be a little more aggressive in his decision making and his approach, and I might be more of a people's person, for example, or have that sort of softer side that people feel more comfortable talking to. But I don't want to generalize, because I see in our business that while that might be the dominant sort of personality between the two of us, he has his way with people in a very different way. And I think the important thing is to recognize it and then use it effectively in whatever needs to be done. So, and it's not just about, when you run a business, it's not just about you in your silo of your team. Often in hospitality we have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of people in government organizations, and they tend to be men. At least I remember when we started out, a lot of them tend to be men. They don't want to be talking to me, but there were times when Jay would take me along to meetings, because it would almost throw the person off a little bit, and the conversation would take a slightly different turn if I was present versus if I'm not, and it's very interesting. I mean, and I've been in meetings and I've heard this in interviews and I never believed it, but I have been in meetings where it's me and another male person from our team and say a bureaucrat, and I'm speaking and the response is being like, they're not even looking at me and responding, and they're looking at my male colleague and speaking, and but I think the important thing is how you deal with it. You can either get completely rattled and offended, which of course, yes, it is offensive, but or you can focus on getting your job done and not saying that, Arey, what's the point of me being there? They don't even, no, be there. Keep talking, and at some point that change will happen. You know, you have to believe in it, but you can't give up at the first instance of someone ignoring you in a meeting. You know, I always give this example of I'm part of the National Restaurant Association of India, and I was invited to be a member of the managing committee, and I still remember this. We joke about it, but the first time when I was sort of invited, the reason given was that, Arey, there are no women, will you, we really need to have someone, will you come? And I said that, I was like, yeah, I will, but not because of that. And, and then I thought about it, and then he was like, I'm really sorry I said that. And, but that was the thought process that, now it's, you have to appear to be diverse, inclusive, etc. And the thing that I always tell sort of fellow, women entrepreneurs is that, if that's what gets you a seat at the table, take it. If, it's because of your gender that you're getting the seat at the table, take it. At least you're getting a seat at the table. Then you're getting that opportunity to prove yourself.
Then you can bring in other women also.
Exactly. So, don't feel offended because, that's not the politically correct thing, and, why should it be? What about my skills and my, attributes as a businesswoman? It's like, at least you're getting that seat.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes ego just clashes with
I think you have to be smart about it and use it to your advantage, always.
Yeah, but you mentioned that the meetings would have been different in your absence. So what kind of difference are you talking about?
I think, for example, if there's conversation about, something that's maybe not the official way of doing things, or it may take a slight aggressive turn. I think there's a certain decorum that they try and maintain in front of women. They're a little more conscious, and
that's good actually, and that's why we should have more women around.
Which is why I got dragged to meetings, even though it was not my department.
I mean, one of our speakers was also saying that, men who don't hold a chip on their shoulders and are proud of the accomplishments of their wives, we should write a book on them.
Absolutely. I mean, my family always says this about my husband Jay, and that, he's very secure, which is why I'm, because we are equal partners in the business, but, I tend to be the face of the brand a lot more than him. He's a little more sort of, out of the limelight as such, but, we're equally vested and involved in the business. And it does take a very secure man to be okay with that. But I think we need lots more of them.
I know. He's quite an inspiration to many.
And he doesn't even know it.
But talking of the unconscious gender bias that people have, how do you think in our ways we can eradicate that? Because you're a part of many boards and you chair many organizations. I would love to know that what kind of initiatives can we get in to get more women into the workforce and get them activated with their networks?
So I think one of the most important things is, I'm part of a lot of women's networking groups, and these are not just social soirees. They're actually intending to give women the tools, the network, the knowledge. There's so many different reasons to be part of these networks, and I think that the one thing is that to meet other women, to know that there are a lot of other women like you who may have the same sort of challenges, who may have who may have found ways of dealing with certain situations, and learning from each other. So I think that the first thing is that let's get those women out of their sort of cubicles and meeting each other and talking to each other. But I think the other thing is bringing to the fore, whether it's through the news, whether it's through social media, etc., the achievements of what women were who were otherwise doing this very quietly, bringing that to the light, so that it does subconsciously firstly inspire other women that oh my god, this one did it, like it's not a sort of only male kind of possibility. And the second thing is that it just shows men that there are a lot of women doing cool things. So I think those are the two things. Firstly, women themselves realizing that there are a lot of other women doing things, and secondly, just putting it out there. I mean, today we were talking about Mala Gaonkar sort of heading this $1.8 billion hedge fund and being helmed by a woman. And yes, it's being lauded and highlighted because she's a woman. But again, like I said, talk about it. At least people are talking about it. At least it's making the headlines, And I have no sort of doubt and complete faith that down the line it will be as commonplace as a guy sort of doing it. And today I genuinely believe that being a woman is an advantage because there's so much, at least for those who are sort of aware and trying to make a difference, there's so much advantage to being given to women, right? So, for example, as a restaurateur, I was recently invited on a trip to Australia by one of our wine suppliers, and of all the people, they were taking a very handful from India, and the reason I got picked apparently was because I was a woman. And so I was like, hey, again, I don't care why you're picking me, but great, it helps to be a woman, right, in this industry. So I think, I genuinely feel that today it's an advantage, and you're a fool not to take advantage of it if you can.
Yeah, that's right. Even Naya, who came here from the Good Glam group, she was saying that I spoke to a man and he was saying that how can we invite so many women? Are there even such women entrepreneurs? And she's like, what are you saying? There are so many, let me show it to you. And then after a few months, a full coverage on Mint newspaper came in, wherein you were also featured, where they just listed India's top 100 entrepreneurs.
But that's what I'm saying. So you have to bring it to, the fore. You have to highlight what's going on, because it's not that it's not happening. It's just that and I have to say this, and I'm probably going to be unpopular for saying this, but I feel like it's also down to us to talk about ourselves. We sometimes tend to feel like, we can't be shouting about, self-promoting and shouting about what we're doing. And, it took me a while, to be honest, as well. But I think that as long as you're doing it, and you're not just sort of putting rubbish out there, but you're doing it in a way where you will be inspiring people. I mean, and you may not be doing it for that reason. You may just be saying something because you think it's important to put it out there. I've had people, and the first few times it happened and Jay was with me, he was kind of laughing. He thought it was a little strange, but I've had people come up to me and be like, oh my God, you're such an inspiration. And even I was a bit like, oh, okay. But then you start realizing that what you're putting out there is making an impact, and you have to keep doing it. So I would definitely say that, as much as we need to be putting other people out there, other women out there, we need to be putting ourselves.
Correct. We need to put ourselves out. And that's also the reason why, most of the women don't get promoted to senior levels, because when it comes to the performance evaluation, they don't feel confident enough to speak of their achievements. They think they're boasting or blowing their own trumpet, which is not true. And, the same male counterpart who maybe probably did lesser or equal work will just get a higher salary and get the jump.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have, no one's going to bat for you beyond what you can do for yourself, as much as what you can do for yourself. So you're really doing a disservice to yourself if you don't do that. And, like with anything in life, you have to have a balance. It's not about just blowing a trumpet constantly, but if you have something important to say it. What's the worst that'll happen, right? I mean, I always think of that. What's the worst thing that'll happen? Someone will say no, or someone will ignore you, or your post won't get likes, or whatever it is. It's so big deal,
But at least you're putting yourself out there. Someday it will happen.
And something will pick up, and something will happen at at some point. We all start at zero, even the men. So it's it's just a matter of starting.
And on that note, I'm very inspired by Richard Branson's quote where he says, screw it, let's do it, Don't think or overthink about it. Just get into the action, and I'm sure something will happen.
Yeah, no, I think, it's my mantra as far as when I feel sort of nervous about doing something, or I'm like, what's the worst? Yeah.
But when were you nervous now that you are?
No, I mean, I think it's not about nervous. It's about when you start out, and you sometimes we have this sort of imposter syndrome that am I really like what people are saying I am, and I get all this sort of credit, I get all this mileage, I get all these sort of accolades, and do I really deserve it? And you go through a lot of this sort of self-doubt and questioning, and that's natural. I mean, it's bound to happen. I think,
but it doesn't happen with men, by the way. I'm sure Jay wouldn't think about this.
I don't know. I don't think like a man, so I don't know what they go through. But I think that if you do go through it, it is natural. But I think the important thing is that to snap out of that and not use it to your advantage, but recognize that if you are being given a platform, if you are a voice that people are listening to, then use it. Use it to make some impact. Don't take it lightly, and don't lose the opportunity.
Yeah. But taking a step back, how is it to launch a restaurant? What does it really take? I saw your story the other day where somebody reposted and said that if you want to know my journey, just hear my podcast with Gauri and you'll know it all. So I now want to know it from you, that how was your journey? How did it all start? With what did it all start?
So I don't cook. I can't cook. It definitely didn't start in the kitchen. But it did start with a love of food. And I think for both of us who, because neither of us are from hospitality, for both of us, it was just a pure love of food. And I think everything that we did in our first restaurant stemmed from, from creating something that we wished was there. So it was purely driven by a need that we had, and we, in terms of whether it was service style, whether it was the kind of food we were doing, how we wanted to feel when we went to a restaurant. So that's literally what drove, because we didn't have any formal degree in it, or didn't have work experience in it. So it really wasn't something that we were following a crib sheet or any checklist. And it really came from that gut and wanting to create something that we would love enough to dine at every day. I think it was as simple and basic as that. And
but what was the gap where you thought that, okay, I am not as satisfied here and I could be if I create something?
So when we first started thinking about the restaurant, it was back in 2008. And that's when we first started looking for a space. It took a good over 1 year actually to find the right location. Bombay is not the easiest when it comes to real estate. And so it back in 2008, when both of us had actually just moved back. I just moved back from London. Jay had moved back from California, and the dining scene was very, very different from what it is today. Today you have restaurants opening left, right and center, a huge variety of cuisines. Everyone doesn't only go to 5 stars anymore, which was the case to a large extent back in,
because you only had that place to go. Exactly.
I mean, a lot of it was largely relegated to 5 stars, at least as far as like premium dining was concerned, which is the segment we're in. And so 15 years ago, that was what it was. So, we really felt that, and having been exposed to sort of a very different scenario, where we had both lived before moving back, we just felt like why is that not happening in Bombay, right? So both in terms of the type of cuisine, so the cuisine of the table is very much inspired by Californian restaurants, which are actually cuisine agnostic, which basically means they don't have one cuisine, like and in Bombay it was always like, acha, you're an Italian restaurant or a Chinese restaurant or an Indian restaurant, whereas here we were like, the food could be inspired from anywhere in the world. The hero is really the ingredient, right? And in California, that's the nature of dining, because they get amazing produce. It's the perfect climate for growing vegetables, fruits, farms, etc. So they really, it's like, it's the mecca of good food, if I can say that. And I think we were missing that back in Bombay, and we felt like, why can't that happen here? and so our first chef was from California, and and that's,
how did you convince him to fly down to India when India had nothing?
It was an adventure, right? So he said, okay, I'll give it one year, and and then he's still here. So
wow.
It's it was something. It just happened to all come together. Even in terms of the space, we felt like, for those 2 hours that we're in the restaurant, we want to kind of forget we're in the hustle bustle of Bombay. And so we had an architect he was from India, but had lived in New York and had his practice there for the longest time. And so he kind of was able to bring that aesthetic of a restaurant that was possibly somewhere else in the world, but in a heritage building in Bombay. So it kind of bringing in the best of both. And I think, it was a long process, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes made, but...
like what lessons, if you could just...
So, I was talking about the architect. We actually, the one that finally did the restaurant was our second architect. We started with another one initially, and 4 months in, just didn't feel right about the way it was turning out. And while a lot of money had gone in, and we decided to just sort of redo it. So gut what he had done and start again from scratch, because it just didn't feel right. And a lot of what we were doing was following our gut. And then we found Tariq, who ended up doing it, and it just felt right when he did his initial drawings, and we were like, this is it. And but obviously that was an expensive sort of process, because you've spent a significant amount of money, and you're starting to pay rent and not earning any revenue. So we took a good 14 months to finally do up the restaurant, which honestly is the worst.
Did you pay
from a business
14 months
perspective.
of rent without any revenue?
12 months. So, and we lost all the money that we'd spent from doing up with the first architect. But I mean, I think that was the best decision we made. Yes, it took us longer, obviously, and we went over budget, but like 12 years later, I still feel good going into the restaurant. I don't feel like it's a dated space. I think that the vibe is timeless, if I may say so, and I think that's something money can't buy.
Yeah, that's right. But did you bootstrap at all till date, or did you have investors on the go?
No, we did bootstrap and continue to do so. But I think, and that's something, again, I tell people who want to get into this industry, is that make sure you have money that you are happy to lose, and not something that you're depending on. You're not putting all your life savings into this, because it's a very challenging business, and as is, as are many industries and many businesses, but this particularly is one that is very capital intense. You have to spend a lot upfront, and it takes a long time to start seeing, reaping the rewards of it generally. So be prepared to, put aside money, which you're okay even if you lose that 100%. So, I mean, I think that, we had done that because we'd worked for a while, and had put that aside, and it was kind of like a little bit of, almost like play money, that you say, okay, I'm going to do this, it's a passion, I'm going to do this, and I know that I'm still okay even if that doesn't,
and this boils to managing your personal finance, which
comes back to that
again,
right?
Unfortunately many women lose out on or don't see much advantage in. And I heard you speak about it on your podcast, where you spoke with women on the importance of it, and you have had friends also who have managed to both struggled with it and still gone ahead and are doing it brilliantly well. So if you could cite some instances of your conversation around personal finance where women have dealt with it in a very graceful way.
So I think one of the things is that I have a dear friend, actually she's become a dear friend now, who's a personal financial advisor, independent financial advisor, and I think a lot of times women might feel intimidated, kind of even maybe talking to a man, like a sort of random man, about how to save and you have to build trust as well. There's all of that, right? So I think firstly, like finding the right financial advisor is really important, and it's not about like putting away lakhs every month. You could start with 20,000 or 50,000 or whatever, But I think understanding how to manage money, a financial advisor can be really helpful to do that, and happy to sort of connect people who are interested. That's one thing, and I think like I said earlier, it's really important to not be dependent on someone else. I mean, I've seen situations, whether it's divorce or whether it's business going to pot. I mean, we've seen that even with like women in very high positions. We read about this in the news today that they basically kind of didn't have that ownership of their own money, and maybe have been swayed to make decisions which are not financially smart to do. And it comes and bites you in the backside, sort of at the most inopportune time. So it's really important to you just never know what's around the corner. So it's just so important to have at least that level of control.
Yeah, that's right. Also, when you were speaking about your restaurant launch way back when you didn't have much in town, how did you actually market it out and get people, come to your restaurant to pay those 14 months heavy rent?
I'm still trying to get them in. It's funny because so we opened the restaurant in Jan 2011, and there was no Instagram at that time. So it was literally word of mouth. And there is no marketing like word of mouth marketing, right? Nothing can, word of mouth can make or break your restaurant. And so we were just lucky that we could, it worked in our favor. And, we've had it in another situation where we've opened another restaurant where the word of mouth didn't work in our favor, and we ended up actually closing it 15 months later. And and that was in the era of social media, so it doesn't matter how much social media marketing you can do and how much money you throw at it. Word of mouth is what really counts.
Wow. Do you remember who was like your first few customer segment?
Of course. So it was some friends and family, but it was also people I didn't know, but I've never forgotten them because they were our first paying customers, and some of them have become friends, in fact. Of course, it is something that you'll never forget.
And would you be in the restaurant throughout the day for years?
So, I mean, for the first few years, Jay and I actually got married 3 weeks before we opened the restaurant. It was the worst timing ever. So our honeymoon was spent in the restaurant, pretty much. But no, I mean, the first few years, we were there day in and day out. We literally used to go home, sleep, come back, and be there. And I think it was important because like I said, we didn't know anything about the business, and so everything we know and learned was on the job.
Correct.
But to do that, you have to be at the job, and you have to, so everything from like taking reservations to, helping in the kitchen if they were getting slammed, or talking to guests, doing the marketing, doing, PR, talking to the press, whatever. All of it, we all had to do, except for the cooking bit. That they obviously wanted me to have nothing to do with that, with good reason. But it's something that you have to do, and even if you do know the industry, I think it's very important to be part of all the processes. Firstly, to understand, then and to be able to improve on them. And secondly, if I wasn't taking reservation calls and things in the beginning, I wouldn't have known the kind of questions that people were asking, what they were not happy about, what they sort of were wanting us to do differently and things. So I think it's really important, not just from a learning about the industry, but also improving on what you're offering.
This reminds me that Zomato's Dipinder Goyal, he himself used to go and deliver, and he still does it once a quarter, just to have that pulse of the customer and not stay away from them, because ultimately,
no, I mean, like, you may not understand what a delivery guy is going through if you don't do it yourself. I'm not saying you have to do everything yourself, but sometimes it's needed.
And when did you start spending your energy in something else away from the restaurant. When was that point in time where you saw growth and success coming in, where people were able to manage your restaurant and take the ownership?
Oh, I don't think I've got there yet. But no, it's very important to build a team.
Yeah.
You cannot evolve yourself, nor can the business grow if you're doing the same thing throughout. But it takes time, and there's no rush, or there's no race, or there's no benchmark by when you should be doing XYZ thing. I mean, there are people who've opened 5 branches of their restaurant within 3 years or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter. You do your pace, you go at it, but do it when you know that you have the right people. When you're in the service industry, it's really important. People is everything. You might think it's about the food, you might think it's about like the wine or whatever. It's really actually at the end of the day about the people. And so building that solid team is so critical to then even allowing you to do other things and to grow the business. So I think the first time when I really kind of let go a little bit and started relying and trusting my team a lot more was when I had our child Dia, and she's 9 today, 9 years old now. But that was a time when I had to learn how to step away from the business. But obviously the business didn't stop. So
and that's the beauty of having a team, that when you're away, it still runs as a full-fledged show.
But it took time. I mean, I remember our first long trip, so long meaning a month off, back to the US, happened in the 3rd year of our restaurant. So till then we didn't feel confident taking off for a month and taking off to somewhere that's that far that you're not like an hour away, a phone call away. So it does take time, and you need to, when you get into something like this, and I can't speak for other industries, but definitely in this business, you have to be patient. And you have to be willing to give it that time before, it's not something that goes on to autopilot overnight, and be aware of that when you're getting into it.
Like you mentioned, it's all a people's business also, and at the end of the day, sometimes you might not have very warm customers, and that unfortunately happens in some restaurants. So in that cases, how do you really manage to keep your team motivated, especially your frontline staff? That okay, it's just one of the instances, other day will be better, and you need to stay with us, you are a part of us.
I mean, I have to give like 100% credit to our team for putting up with some not so nice guests, and but I think that I think they're far more resilient than me. I mean, I would get more easily offended and upset. I think they understand that it's a little bit part and parcel, and I have to say that now, like 12 years in the business, I've seen it get better, at least as far as our restaurants are concerned. I can't speak for everyone. Then I think people are a little more aware, a little more sort of that sort of class divide, and is hopefully reducing a little bit, and the industry overall is being given more respect. Earlier, like, I don't think parents would be happy if their kids were saying, I want to become a chef. Whereas today, it's a very highly respected profession. I know even in my daughter's school, I know someone who just finished their 12th grade and applied to culinary school, and you didn't see that happening, even until a few years ago. So I think that the whole industry and the restaurant business is, people working in the restaurant business are more respected now. And so hopefully that does reduce such instances.
But then how did you go on expanding to other chains also? You have a couple of other restaurants too, and when did that start? When did you think that it's now the time to launch the second restaurant after the success of the first one?
I mean, it's a combination of things. It's not, you might be ready, but either you can't find the right location, or it's there's a whole lot of things that have to come together when you start expansion. And we did it, like I said, at our own pace. We were not, that's one of the tricky things actually when you have investors, is that when they put all this money into your business, they expect you to invest it. They expect you to use it so that it starts generating returns. And I think we had a very different approach, where we didn't want to go down that route. We wanted to be the master of our own sort of money in a way, and our own decisions. And so therefore it meant that, the pace at which we scaled was slower and determined by us. And we also, because it was self-financed, we wanted to ensure that the business was generating that finance to a large extent, so that it's not just you putting in more and more.
Correct.
And so so there are various things that kind of dictated how we, how we grew when we grew. But like I said, we spoke, about this restaurant that we closed just before COVID. And we pivoted to a different concept in about a year and a half ago, and that really took off. So, and that's a concept that we feel we can scale. It's called Max Street Cafe. Unlike the table, where we don't feel we can have like 5 tables in the city, but the cafe is something that we feel is a concept that can be scaled. It's more of a neighborhood place, so it's something that you can have multiple locations in throughout the city, and especially because now Bombay with traffic is getting sort of more and more polarized. So we opened a second one in Lower Parel, and hopefully there'll be more in 2023. So I think it's a combination of the right time financially, in terms of a team, in terms of finding the right location, and most importantly having a concept that can be scaled. Because not everything can just be works in replication.
But how do you come up with these concepts? What happens in your brainstorming sessions?
So again, a lot of it is driven in our case by what we would like. And we had this location, and during COVID we'd launched a couple of delivery brands. And they'd taken off well. The response was amazing. One was a pizza brand, one was Vietnamese. So it was actually the Asian restaurant that we closed. We converted into a delivery brand, and people started responding to it really well during COVID. So then we were like, look, we've got all this, these different cuisines under our umbrella, and so why not create a concept where we can move from a delivery format into a dine-in format. And I think during COVID, one of the things everyone was seeking was comfort, right? Because they'd been battered left, right, and center. I think we were seeking that ourselves, and we have a bakery brand as well, Max Street Bread Co. So the concept kind of came into shape because of what was available to us. We weren't in a position to like bring chefs, international chefs down and things like that. It was too volatile a situation. So I think the circumstances just dictated what we would do. But one philosophy we've had like throughout, whether it's we now have 4 delivery brands, we have 2 dine-in concepts, and then we have this event menu, which is Mag Street Kitchen. Throughout everything we've done in the last 12 years, I think the one thing that has been like our sort of the benchmark in a way that we've set is just to have a really high standard of quality. So never compromise on that. Shut a restaurant if you have to, rework the menu if you have to, but like the quality is something that will never ever be compromised. So I think that's worked in our favor, and that's kind of been our guiding light for whatever we do, whether it's Indian food or pizzas or fine dining. And so that's basically the approach we take to everything.
But how was it during the pandemic, especially when lockdown was announced? I mean, it's a very difficult phase for somebody who's running a physical outlet, and then you suddenly know that nobody is going to visit that for years.
Well, you didn't actually. So when we closed the restaurants down, it was a few days before lockdown was announced, because we could see the numbers dwindling. We knew something's a little off here. Because people were calling the restaurant. Usually they call and they're like, "Arey, please get me a table, get me a table." And they were like, "How many people are in the restaurant?" And and if we said a high number, they were like, "Then I'm not coming." And usually it was the other way around, right? Like they were desperate to come even if we were full. Whereas now they were like, "Acha, call me back when there's like only 10, 15 people." So when we started getting calls like this, or we saw reservations getting cancelled, my daughter's school was closed, etc. There was obviously something going off, and so we just said, okay, look, let's close for 2 weeks. So this was mid-March. We said, let's close for 2 weeks and take stock at the end of the month. So we sent home most of our team. They started going back to their villages, which they could because the lockdown hadn't been announced. And then it got announced. Nobody at that point knew it's going to go on like this for years or months or anything like that. So, we were like, okay, anyway, we're closed and we were all chilling. We were like, wow, 10 days off. Like, we've never had this ever. And like, this was whatever, 2020. So it'd been 10 years in the business.
Yeah.
We'd never had this kind of time off. Because even when you go traveling, honestly, you'll still get calls. You'll still have your daily reports coming on email.
Yeah.
It's not like you truly switch off.
Yeah.
That time, we truly switched off. I think we just slept and did puzzles and like cooked. And I didn't cook, but I mean, there was just like really, this was the true downtime that we all had, right? And then suddenly, like 10 days in, we were like, okay, this is clearly getting worse. It's not, the downtime was great for like a week, 10 days, but now what? And then they announced that, they started sort of announcing the policies, and one of them at the end of March was that bakeries were considered an essential service. So we were like, we've got a bakery.
Yeah.
Let's, at least start that. Like, what's the, and I know they meant probably the bakeries doing the basic bread and pav and that kind of thing, and not croissants and sourdough, but we were like, it's a bakery, so technically, we fall into this. And we started our bakery business, I think like on the 31st of March. And we were one of the first to be able to get up and running. Because a few of our bakers and team members were in Bombay. They hadn't gone, to their hometowns.
Yeah.
And it just blew up.
Wow.
It went crazy. So we didn't anticipate what was going to happen, but we were just like, hey, this is survival mode. Like, just open and see what happens. And just through, again, deliveries online, etc. Like, it just went really crazy. I mean, I'm so grateful, to the team that was there, who, like, made it happen. And I mean, I was going into work every day as well, like packing boxes, etc. And that's, and then from there on, obviously one by one things open. But I think the most important thing, for learning for us, and I think businesses as a whole, was learning to be agile. So okay, you can do this. So one of the things we started during lockdown, because we realized a lot of people were moving to Alibag, for example, and making their base there. So then we started doing deliveries there, because we had a base over there ourselves. So we said, okay, like, there's no restaurants open there, there's no delivery, anything. Now you have that in Alibag as well.
That's a smart move.
Yeah, but that's the thing, like, you have to, like, we were never doing deliveries to Alibag before that. We weren't doing deliveries, period. Like, we were so focused on our dine-in restaurants. That was what our brand was all about. And delivery was always seen as this like stepchild, like you just do naam ke vaste, whereas now it became your bread and butter. And so the thing was like, okay, how do we get this sort of, set up so that we can start doing it? And obviously people who'd been sitting in Alibag for like 2 months just eating like, basic whatever home food, suddenly they were like, oh, we can get croissants, or we can get like, food from the table, or we can get. Obviously, there was huge demand.
And you all were the only ones in Alibag.
So, one of the very few, and because we had a base there, we have our farm there as well. So, we were able to do the logistics, without kind of breaking down completely. And so, and then of course, a few months in, the boat service started, where you can take your car across. So then we were able to move from doing weekly deliveries to daily deliveries. So all those things, but I think the important thing is you have to be quick on your feet and see where the opportunity is, and take advantage of it. Yeah, exactly, without losing what's, again, that important thing to you. So, when it comes to even deliveries, we were very conscious of the quality. Like, so we didn't just deliver anything anyone wanted. It was like, okay, will this travel well? Will you still be able to enjoy it if you reheat it? So it was all like every little detail had to be thought through, packaging, etc. So that's how it happened.
It just
became, and we came out on the other side miraculously, and now it feels like one big blur. So
I mean, had it not been for Alibag, it would have been very tough. But did it help you, suffice your rent for the physical outlets?
Again, that was a very, I think that unfortunately for a lot of restaurants that was the make or break for a lot of restaurants during COVID. And we'd had a great relationship with our landlords, so they were very accommodating and understanding. But I don't think that everyone was that lucky, and it led to a lot of restaurants closing. But yeah, I mean, touch wood, we were.
I think your people
Came out
skills
of the
are damn
episode.
good. I mean, to
Jay's
convince
people
them.
skills in this case. No, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the relationship counted for a lot. Like I said,
Yeah.
we'd been around for 10 years at that point. So, you know, and at some point we were like, take the keys back because you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. If there's no
Yeah.
money coming in and, you know, someone thinks, but even the landlords knew that it's not like there's some queue of people
Yeah.
trying to open a restaurant and take
Right.
it over. So, you know, they're better off figuring out a way to make it
Yeah.
work for everyone and you know, and you can't take advantage either, you know. So when restaurants could reopen, we had to reopen, you
Yeah.
know, and obviously we wanted to, but yeah, and you know, you sort of it's a give and take.
Did you reopen all of them at once, or you took one? by
So
one?
we, at that point when COVID had hit, we had 2 restaurants, the Table and Miss Tea, which
Yeah.
was the one we closed. So we closed it just before COVID. But
And why
we,
was it closed? If you could share.
So I think it was a combination of things. You know, it was a new cuisine for us. So we were doing Southeast Asian food, which we'd never done before.
Okay.
And while we did have chefs from, you know, the relevant regions coming and doing the food, it didn't hit it off with I guess the
Public,
Bombay palate. And also maybe, you know, by the time we realized things that we needed to do, you know how Bombay is, first day, first show,
Yeah,
everyone wants to
yeah.
come out. So you know, you don't get a second chance often in this city, and I think it was too late for us. And you know, we had a lot of learnings from it. So in that sense, it was a great learning experience, a little expensive one, but a great
Yeah.
learning experience. And so we'd actually closed that in November 2019, and we're working on a new concept because we invested in the space, so we didn't want to sort
Yeah.
of just let go of it. And that new concept, which was a Cantonese restaurant, opened 10 days before lockdown. So
Shit.
yeah, so you know, at that point when I told you we had to, we decided voluntarily to like close the restaurants, thinking it was just a few weeks. Our chefs were from Singapore and Malaysia, and we said go back for a couple of weeks and
Yeah.
we'll call you back when things get better or whatever. And obviously like 2 years later they were still not able to come back. So that restaurant we were not able to reopen, even though we'd spent 4 or 5 months doing it up and you know, working on the menu and the concept, opened it for a week, and then so we were not able to because, you know, the main chefs couldn't come back, and that's when we decided a year later to pivot to the cafe concept, which thankfully has stayed
in the same
in the same
place.
space. So it's this is the third version of what we've done, what we're doing there, and you know, Jay and I were like, okay, this is it. This is like, you know, hopefully third time's a charm. But if it's not, that's it. We're not kind of you know, hold on to something that but yeah, it worked.
My God, such a story of twists and turns.
It is. It's crazy. So on that note, I actually have a book coming out about this, and you know, it's actually about this. So a lot of what we've talked about, and lots more sort of funny and fun and not so fun incidents. Just, you know, just a narrative about what's
the name, if you could disclose it on the show?
It's called, okay, see here, you'll be the first to know. It's called Diamonds for Breakfast, and it's a little bit about Sobo and you know, just the crazy journey that's been. So the restaurant turns 12 in January, and so it's sort of to celebrate surviving and flourishing, hopefully. Surviving and thriving, hopefully. Yeah,
I mean, your story is truly like the survival of the fittest. I go back to my days.
The fittest, the craziest, the sort of I mean, it's like, I know, it's there's lots of ways to label us, which are not all something. But no, I think I think it all comes back to that first point, which is you have to truly believe in what you're doing and love it, because there will no doubt be a lot of times when you're tested, and you know, your patience, your resilience, your sort of, you know, everything is tested literally, and there has to be something that keeps you going. So and it can't be just money.
And I mean, during these tough times also, it's good to see that you didn't feel the need to get investors because y'all are managed?
I don't think there were any investors unless you were in like FMCG or like or beauty products or something. No, I think definitely in hospitality there was no one pouring money our way. But you know, it again took a day at a time, and you know, I mean, it was like it had ups and downs, right? Because we were closed till I think for 6 months or 7 months, and then you know, things opened up, and then again the second lockdown happened, and we probably wouldn't have survived a third lockdown, but thankfully.
But what did you do in those 6 months when just
we
nothing
were doing
was
the
happening?
deliveries? So we were building the delivery. We launched a new delivery brand. So the pizza brand that I mentioned, Mac Street Toppings, that was something. So you know what happened is that a lot of people, a lot of highly skilled chefs were being laid off, right? Because restaurants couldn't open, they couldn't sustain if they couldn't like hack it with landlords, and so there was actually a lot of talent available, and we had the space because we had Mac Street Kitchen where our bakery was operating, and it's a 2,500 square foot kitchen, central kitchen in a way for us, but it's also an event venue. So we had the space, there was talent available, and with not too much investment we were able to then, and we'd been thinking about doing pizzas for a long time and just kind of like, we're like, whatever, we'll do it at some point. And then we were like, okay, now you've got the talent, you've got the space, you've got the demand, because delivery is like,
just the pizza is missing.
Exactly. So then we created that concept. We had an Indian, so we had by then like 4 delivery brands, and then the restaurant, the table also started doing its delivery. So literally between 5 brands we were doing deliveries. So during lockdown, that's what sustained us. And even within the deliveries, we were thinking of creative ways to do it so that people, we had a sustained business. And it really did, like, I mean, luckily because the bakery, there were no other bakeries open when we started ours. So it really took off. In fact, there were times when we had to like deny orders because we didn't have the manpower to, supply it. And it really, that's kind of what got us through, ironically. Like a very small part of our business pre-COVID suddenly became the bread and butter, no pun intended, of the business post-COVID. So, or during COVID rather. So, and then, when you're like in the shits, you have to like figure out how to do it, right? And how to like be creative and think of ways to generate revenue. And I think, like you said, survival. Right? So,
But you got lucky that you got the talent available so easily. But otherwise, when the world is, wanting to fetch some best chefs in the world, how do you really convince someone to join your restaurant? How does hiring take place in your kind of a business?
Good question. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, obviously now we've built brands, and so there's a little bit of legacy that people want to be associated with. But it's, it's really, that's one thing Jay loves, is he literally entertain any chef anytime. So any chef who walks in through the door, and in fact, the first chef I mentioned to you moved on about 7 years after we opened the restaurant, and so obviously we were looking for someone to take his place. And the person who ended up doing that was someone who literally walked in for a meal and just left a note saying, I'm a chef, I'm interested. And we connected, and he did a trial for us. We completely loved his food. We were like, he was from Philadelphia, is from Philadelphia, and happened to be traveling through Bombay. And he ended up sticking around and being with us, So the chef we have currently is someone who did a pop-up with us, a 2-day pop-up with us he's from London. And at this event venue that I mentioned, Mac Street Kitchen, he'd come and done a pop-up which was meant to be a one-off thing. Again, fell in love with his food, went to his restaurants when we happened to be in London, stayed in touch, and when we were like, look, we're looking for someone, and he was like, I'm available. And that's, so a lot of it is network, reaching out.
Serendipity also.
A little bit. I mean, of course, there are like search firms and things, but we've generally not gone down that route. But a lot of it's word of mouth as well as just reaching out to your network of chefs that we've built and grown over the years.
But speaking of network, like conversations like these are also a good way to get to know people and their journeys. And you've been doing it really well in 3 different categories because you have podcast in all 3 different domains to just take the best of all the 3 worlds. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about each one of your podcasts?
So my podcast journey started very accidentally, as it seems most things in my life. But the first one is it's called the Colaba Cartel, and it was actually about the making of that restaurant that I mentioned closed. So we decided that, you know, people always celebrate a restaurant after it's opened, and, you know, they go and they see all the finished product and the sort of loveliness of it, and they never know what actually went behind the scenes to get it to that place. And so we did a podcast where it was each episode, you know, talked about a different aspect of opening a restaurant. So location or interior design or the food menu or the bar menu or, you know, etc. So that was really fun. And then, you know, I did enjoy it, but then the producer was after me to do another show, and I was like, you know, on what? And so that's when, and then when COVID happened, you know, where everyone was sitting at home and had sort of, you know, a lot of time on their hands, I was like, okay, if I don't start now, I'm never going to start. So that's when This Round Is On Me started. And, you know, the idea was that, so we have the table is named after the community table in our restaurant. And I've met so many interesting people just sitting there, just being in the restaurant, and had amazing conversations. And a lot of them I've learned a lot from. And I was just like, you know, I have these one-on-one, and I've met so many amazing people over the years, you know, not just at the restaurant, but generally. And I think it's, you know, only fair to like share these conversations with a wider audience, since I do have access to people, and you know, and someone's telling me to do a podcast. So I was like, okay, let's do this. So it started off, you know, really from a place of not knowing how to handle this COVID situation, and trying to learn from other people in different industries how they were handling it, and if there was a way to learn from them. So, you know, whether it was like Mr. Harsh Mariwala or you know, Siddharth Roy Kapoor, who's in entertainment, or, you know, any people in like a whole range. I mean, of course, chefs and restaurateurs as well. And it was just amazing, you know, like a lot of people were going through the same thing but had, you know, figured certain things out, and just sharing that was very interesting for me. And obviously it's moved on beyond COVID. It's talking to thought leaders and industry experts generally, even today. And, you know, the world is moving so fast, everything's changing so fast, so it's great to be getting insights from people, and it's my sort of get away from work, honestly. So
but how many of them were women from the thought leaders you spoke?
I haven't ever counted on This Round Is On Me, but then I've done the 3rd show, which is Women on Top in India, which I mentioned. And so we have 1 season out already, which is 10 episodes, and so the 10 women on that. But I mean, I do try and balance it between the men and women, even on This Round, and I think we've done a decent job of that. But I mean, they're not all entrepreneurs, they're people in different fields. But lots of very interesting conversations. What were some of the
fun learnings you took out of your conversations, and some serious learnings where they spoke of how they are, you know, questioned by investors if they'll be able to lead their businesses by themselves if they are solopreneurs?
So, you know, the Women on Top in India, the difference between that show and the other one, I mean, of course, it speaks to women entrepreneurs, but it's very much about their business journey, right? And their sort of the business side of what they do. And invariably, out of those 10 women, I think half of them at least were women who had raised funds from investors. And when I asked them what that sort of experience was like, I think nobody, literally every single one of them talked about the sort of stereotyping and the gender bias that they faced. And, you know, and these are like very successful women in business, you know, I mean, Malika Sadani from the Moms Co, Lizzie Chapman, you know, it's like really like people who've done well for themselves, who've raised then, you know, a significant amount. And it was amazing that they all had this, you know, experience. So, but hopefully, you know, the fact that they've then gone on to successfully raise funds.
Like what questions were they asked?
So when they went to raise funds, I mean,
Yeah.
like, so, you know, who actually runs the business, where, like, you know, but where are the sort of, who are your business partners, as in, you know, and kind of also not just being taken seriously.
Yeah.
And, you know, in one case, that episode's not out yet, but there were 2 women, like, co-founders.
Yeah.
So it was like, where's the guy?
Huh.
It's like, there is no guy, you know. And so I think that's the kind of thing. And then also, like, assuming that they don't know their numbers.
Yeah.
Kind of what you alluded to
Right.
earlier. So yeah, I mean, it's I hope it's changing. I think
Yeah.
that, you know, one of the networks I'm part of, Ladies Who Lead, they do this they do this great sort of thing called they call espresso funding, where it's basically you can go and pitch to investors.
Yeah.
There's a panel of investors, and you go and make a pitch. Now it's not to get them to invest;
Yeah.
it's to have a practice run of pitching and having questions asked.
Okay.
So you kind of get practice, because
Yeah.
who gets that practice otherwise,
Right.
right? And a lot of them said this. They said that, like, we went to like 30, 40 funds to, you know, to pitch,
yeah.
and it got better because of the questions that they were being asked, and then they were better prepared the next
Yeah.
time, and then even better prepared. But, you know, you kind of don't want to be learning on the job when it's coming to
Yeah.
something like raising money for your company. So this is a great way for a lot of people who
Yeah.
intend to raise to have that sort of dry run. But yeah, I think that, you know, they were just like, we had to do it, and I guess they saw a lot of it. And then the good thing is, I think the ones who were not necessarily taking them seriously or
Yeah.
had this gender bias, they also knew that they're not the right fit for their businesses. So I guess it weeded out a lot of the sort of, you know, the investors who they probably shouldn't have had
Yeah.
anyway. So yeah.
That's very nice that you're hosting these shows. I mean, you also get to be updated on what's going on, and they also get the right visibility.
Yeah,
And
no, I mean, I think,
yeah.
like, even on this round is on me. Like, you know, I just spoke to someone who's, you know, he's an expert in HR, right? He's been, and it wasn't just, you know, it was like, a lot of what I ask is based on my experience of what I'm going through in our organization.
Right.
And, you know, sort of, it's almost like a private, you know, consulting session, but it's not. It's like something that, you know, everyone should be listening to.
Yeah.
And we all have these same issues, you know, in our organizations. And, you know, I think as much as I'm doing this to learn from it, I think, you know, the great thing is that anyone can listen and
Yeah.
implement and
Yeah.
learn from it. So.
But on visibility front, I mean, we don't have episodes where you speak with men on top in India. So, I mean, really there's a gap because of which we're only speaking to women and bring them up. And I hope that stories...
well, you're doing that.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, like, our stories both
Yeah.
on our show should, you know, get more out and about, and people should know
Absolutely.
about how women are still, you know, thriving in different
Absolutely.
ecosystems. But on that note, I really thank you for being on the show. I
Thank
had a
you.
lovely time chatting with you.
Me too, and thank you so much for having me.